So, good afternoon. Whoa, that's loud. I hope you enjoyed lunch. We're going to talk about have you gone MADR or MADR, whatever you want to pronounce it with, but it's about documenting decisions. So, let's first start out with who I am, because this is the reason I'm doing these kind of talks. I often get people asking me, what do you do? Because you do so many things, and typically I say I develop things and talk about them, or I build things, etc. However, what I actually do is most of the time I'm a full stack engineer, so working in Java, Kotlin, JavaScript, designing front ends, but I'm also a part-time developer advocate within products within ING, where I'm helping with not promoting products, but actually promoting engineering culture and helping our engineers with it. So I'm also a co-organizer of our internal backend guild, but also from the newest Java user group, which happens to be in the north. And we do happen to have a nice session in 2 weeks from now. So if you're looking for some music and how to work together in global teams, then come join us. It is in Groningen, it's far away, but if you happen to be in the neighborhood, we'll see you there. But that's not why I'm here now, because why did I decide to do something? And that's something I run in often, and also when speaking to other developers run into, is that it gets harder to remember over time. You've made decisions like half a year ago, or maybe even a week ago, and you still have to think like, why did I decide this again? And well, there's the Agile Manifesto that tells you to write code and not document, right? That's how it works out. But in practice, you should still document, but be concise and be comprehensive. And for anyone here, the main question that you will be running into is how well do your handovers go? Because that's the common problem. It's not just within your team if you get a new team member, but it's also if you're helping out other teams to get started in a project, or when you come back to a project you work on maybe half a year ago. And there's reasons for that, because a lot of information is in people's heads. It's typically, oh, ask that colleague because he knows about this. You know it works like that. Or you go searching in your emails or in your chats. And then typically you will find out, okay, that's the reason why we decided this. And that's why we ended up with this decision. Until you figure out that it happens that after 2 years, your chat history is gone. I had it when looking up a solution for an incident. I talked about it 3 years before, and I couldn't find the answer anymore because it was gone because of policy. And it wasn't documented elsewhere. So then there's a nice solution for that, and that's called mark down any decision as a record. Officially, it's architecture, but you can document any decision. So how will this help you? And the reason I came up with this is because I wrote an open source project, and I wanted to think about what if I stop doing this, like a year from now? How will I hand over to another developer? I ran into this as a solution, and I really liked it. So when I talked about it in another presentation I did, I had a lot of people taking pictures, asking me like, hey, should we also do this? Or responding that this is a great idea, we should look into this. And I figured, let's do a nice talk about it. So how do you document decisions? The description itself is hosted on GitHub as a simple page, and they list typically architectural decisions, but they also tell you you can document any decision this way along with your code, because it is embedded with your code base, meaning you can also review it and you have history on it. So the minimum amount, because if you have architectural documents, and those are typically quite long, people read half of them or only the headlines, you can minimize this. And I think you should really be concise in how you document decisions. So you make the decision made, that's typically the title or the file name. You have the context of the problem that you're trying to cover. You have the considered alternatives, because that's also an important part. You made a decision, but what other decisions could you have taken? And why didn't you take them? Those are the kind of things you typically forget over time. The decision itself, you will typically know, because this is the decision we made, this is what we did for the past year. But if you at that point look, what other alternatives did we have, or do we need to extend upon this? You have to redo all the work again. So it's efficiency if you have some stuff documented about that. And that's also the outcome detailing the pros and the cons, because there's no silver bullet, there's always some downsides to a decision you make. And that might change over time, that you might reverse a decision. So how do you apply this? And the agile way is to document it when it adds value. You don't want to document everything at once, because that's also a waste of time. And you don't want to double document. So typically what I see is people copy-pasting all their architectural decisions in, don't do that. Just link to those, because there's already a good description at that point, in-depth descriptions, details. Don't add those to your code, because people also don't read those unless they really need to. So the deeper dive is when you're looking for details and you want to link to those. As mentioned, you want the alternatives as well, and the reasoning why you chose them and why you didn't pick certain alternatives. And they should be static. It is code, you can change it, you can look in history, but typically most of us don't look in the Git history of a document. And of course, if you want to correct a spelling mistake or add another option you might want to consider in the future, that's fine. But if you do change your insights, just close the old decision and start writing a new one. It's just some bytes in your repository after all. And you should add the decisions when someone is having a chat with you and says, hey, we might have to look back at this later on, or it's in your head now, maybe we should document it at this point, because we've asked you twice or 3 times already. And at that point, you know, this is something we should keep. The nice thing I also like about it, because it's in your code base, you will actually do a code review once you merge a new decision or an addition to a decision. So you can also have a discussion at that point and, well, almost make it perfect for the future. And the nice thing is, if someone new comes in, like, hey, why did you choose this? Well, there's a decision, and we can then talk about it. So you don't have to come up with all the reasons you had in the past, and you might forget one, causing new questions. So this is also really a matter of efficiency. And like mentioned, the above should smoothen your future discussions. And it's great to have discussions, but it's also great to have input, so you can quickly move on with the discussion. And if you start this, maybe you have a lot of decisions, but you haven't documented them well yet. Start picking them up with the most important ones. You don't have to do it all at once, but you can do those sprint by sprint by sprint until you're happy with the outcome. So I will try to do a live demo now of how to create a document like this. There you go. So, as you can see, it's readable in the back, by the way. Perfect. Nice. The things that you have is that you have, first you have the problem description. So you have a title. So in this case, I will just create a new one. This is the minimal one I consider. There's a much larger one that has a lot of reasoning in it, etc. But you want to be concise, because if you want a full architectural decision, typically you would make a very large document and store it in your architectural repository as well. So for example, most of your decisions will be architectural, like I want to use this technology for this reason. But in this case, we maybe want to try out latest Java version, because we don't always run a, thank you. We don't always run the latest Java version in production. We typically have the LTS, because otherwise you have to change every 6 months and go through the whole administrative mill to get stuff added. So the thing here would be as well to use latest Java version. You want it to be short, so the problem description is we ran into issues upgrading Java that took a lot of time. What options are there? And so you can decide, keep it as is. Just update the latest LTS. Or you could decide to upgrade the code and test the latest version of Java, so every half year, every 6 months. And then you can write down why you chose this and what the pros and cons were of this. So it will cost you more time, etc., and that will help you to start up the discussion. It can also become like, we did this twice now, it didn't have a lot of benefits, so we'll go back to the LTS option again, and then you have a new decision to store. I will share the repository of this code afterwards. Because I only have 50 minutes, I'm going quite fast with this session. The nice thing, I don't know how many of you are actually running a modern version of Java, but 23, not an LTS, but we'll have 25 later this year, which will include this, will also offer you Markdown in Javadoc. So you have one way of writing your documentation, namely Markdown, and that makes it also easier for developers to style their content, because typically we don't really update and maintain Javadocs. So also to show that element, this is the classic way you would write Javadoc in your application, like include a table, some example code, and of course the descriptions of the parameters, including links. And the funny thing is this actually shows up in IntelliJ as working, but it doesn't, so you need the one with the two braces. And in Markdown it would look like this. So it's even shorter, and if you're used to writing it this way, it's probably also easier for you to pick up. And this is available within the Java 23 and up. So I'm running Java 24 at the moment. So quickly generate a Javadoc. Let's go. There you go. So if you look at the classic example, it will be looking like this. It does look a little bit different for now, but I do hope they will improve upon that. As you can see, the code example is a bit strangely embedded, but overall, the outcome is the same, and it will help you also if you supply a library within your company, for example, for others to use. So, to recap, because I only have 50 minutes, unfortunately, if you make important decisions within your project or within your team or in your department, this is a nice way, because most of the developers are familiar with Markdown by now, to document those decisions. And if you keep them concise and clear, that really helps out people joining you. And whether that's a new colleague joining your company or you supporting another team with their documentation, this will allow you to quickly start. Because typically, if you join another team or support another team, you get an email like, these are the links you should check out, that's where the code is, and well, we'll see you next day, because you have to read up, etc. And writing them down in this way, short, readable, really helps out to quickly onboard to another application. And as mentioned, there's one style of markup, so it's easy to switch as well for a developer. It also helps you to align very well with your fellow developers, because if you write down those decisions, it's no longer in someone's head, but you will actually be discussing them because you have a merge request that you have to finish. It is in code, it is with your code. So another benefit is if you hand over your code to another team, maybe across the ocean, they will also get all the documentation, all the decisions from the past along with it. So that's it for now, but if there's any questions, I think we have 2 minutes left, so I have time for a question. I would like feedback on the start, because it's the first time I'm doing it. So if you have any, please use the right QR codes. And if you're looking into the code examples, like both Javadoc and MADR itself, just on the left. So any questions? Go ahead. So the question is, how do you convince your other team members to join this, right? Okay, so that's also why I'm giving the start, because I'm talking to a lot of people about this, and they're all like, hey, this is a great idea, so how can we carry up? And I had to repeat this whole discussion constantly, so I thought like, hey, let's really do a talk about this. So far, we are doing it in a couple of projects, and it's working quite well. And of course, it depends on your team, on the decisions that you take. Some people add like, we have to check the monitoring in the morning. That's also a decision, but should you document it or not? That's up to the team itself. Because you might end up with a lot of decisions that, well, at a certain point no one reads because it's too many. So you have to keep them really concise and readable. Does it answer your question? Thanks. Another one, yes. Yes. Yes, so how much do you document? Because it's easy to overextend documenting all the decisions. If you look at the basic example they share, there's a lot of optional fields in there as well. And I think it really depends on the engineers and how much information you need within the team. It is possible that if you get a new colleague joining in, and he or she will mention like, hey, I would like some more detail on this, that you could add more detail at that point. I would start small, because you can always extend. And if you start big, then you might be overloading people with information. Then we have 3 seconds left, so I will quickly switch back to the QR codes. And I would like to thank you for joining this talk. Enjoy the day.